All right. The time is 7:33, and I am hereby calling the Wednesday, July 31st meeting of the Capital Planning Committee to order. Just want to advise everybody that this meeting is being recorded.
Recording
both by
in progress.
Lunenburg Public Access Cable, as well as recorded on Zoom, and is being, I believe, broadcast live and will be made available on YouTube at their earliest convenience. The Zoom link is being made available for the convenience of the public, and in the event that there are technical problems, the meeting will proceed in person at this location. We are located at the Bellotta Meeting Room at Town Hall in Lunenburg. And I want to first welcome our new member, Rob Bowen.
Thank you.
Thank you for volunteering, and welcome back to board service.
Yes, it has been a hot minute.
How long has it been?
2008.
All right.
Hot decade and a half.
Well, welcome back. We appreciate you being here.
Pre-ice storm.
Wow.
Wow.
That's
That's a marker.
That's a marker, yeah. We do not have minutes to review or approve. I need to inquire from the town in terms of what we're going to do for a minutes clerk. I don't think we have that resolved at this point. So for now, we have the benefit of the recording, and Matthew, if you could take some notes, and we'll put together some minutes at our earliest convenience. Is there any public comment from the members? Any member?
None from me.
Is there any public
Aside from
comment?
welcoming Mr. Bowen.
Any public comment from the public? There was none here and none on the Zoom. So we will proceed. I have four items on the agenda tonight. And I will take them in order as I have listed them, but in full disclosure, I did not really think through the progression of the meeting. So I will read through them, and then if we have to take them out of order, I think we probably should. So the first is proposal and discussion for capital planning presentations and meeting schedule. The second is standard information criteria for capital planning presentations. The next is discussion of draft financial policy manual and possible follow-up, and then lastly, schedule for future meetings. I have not gotten any feedback specifically in terms of availability for department heads through the town manager or anybody else for that matter in terms of accelerating the schedule. My plan is to reach out to the interim town manager following this meeting. Obviously, I wasn't aware that we had an interim town manager until about an hour ago. Right. We'll work through him to try to resolve accelerating the schedule for the department heads. I have discussed this with the superintendent and the facilities director for the schools. We have a school committee meeting scheduled for next Wednesday, the 7th, and capital planning is on the agenda. I don't expect that there will be, if this is a first glance at the superintendent's proposed capital plan. Right now, currently, our next scheduled school committee meeting is the first Wednesday in September, so immediately following Labor Day, which I believe is the 4th or 5th. So there may be one more meeting before that, but suffice to say, I don't expect that the schools will have an approved capital plan request much before the first week of September, but that date is entirely possible.
Sure.
So my thinking is, based on the thinking of the interim town manager, is that at the very latest, we could begin presentations second week of September.
That'd be great.
At the earliest, we could potentially begin them even in August, depending upon the readiness of, the public safety, in particular, the public safety departments, which, our, I think, collective wisdom is that they largely know what they're going to ask for already.
Yep.
And so, but that, I do think that it's proper to work through the chain of command and to work through the interim town manager to figure that out. Chris had suggested that we formalize a standard for, like a standard presentation. So exactly what should be included in the presentation, should we use, Microsoft Office templates that are, at the discretion of the department head? Should we use plain white paper? Should there be a particular progression? As most of you know, the police department in particular submits a written narrative in addition to their slides. I think we should certainly make a written narrative an option. But I do think that we should ask for some sort of overview of the needs, and then, a slide per request that emphasizes any key points that are not already covered in the ClearGov submission. And my intent is to actually do a printout from ClearGov as well. So all of these things will be theoretically entered into ClearGov. I have access to ClearGov and can literally print that all out directly in terms of the Collins scoring and that sort of thing. But I wanted to open that, like, do you guys have any thoughts in terms of the level of standardization that we should ask for? Does this require a vote of the committee, or could I be empowered to, float an idea? Or
Vote of the committee is up to you. I can provide input at the basis level. I don't want to hamstring anybody by saying you have to shoehorn whatever you want to do into this. I will say some overarching things, like it should be 8.5 by 11 printed sheets. It should be based on. It should be, where applicable, in color, if that is helpful to the slides. And it should be in a PowerPoint presentation, not in a PDF, because, or you could supply both, but it's the PowerPoint.
Very good point that I didn't think of.
Right. Because last year I was, paging through PDFs.
Brutal.
You can't just hit the slide.
Yep.
And it's like, and then I'm trying to center things. So those are the things. And then content-wise, like, I don't want to tell them, this is the font, that it's not like corporate marketing. I don't need to tell them what font size and what font type to use. But I would like to say, like you just said, a title for each request, a short description of what it is, a short reasoning of why they want it and why it's needed, how it's going to be helpful, and then, of course, the pricing, and so the initial purchase price, and then any long-term maintenance price that comes after that.
I got the feeling that one of the things Chris was gunning for, and it might have been, maybe this was not for this, but I thought it was a certain level of justification. And I'm kind of sorting through how I feel about it in my mind, but I think I like it, of how the request fits into the department's future plan.
Yeah.
Because they'll say, oh, well, I showed you the plan, and this was on that. True, but maybe a little more understanding of the why now, why this, why can't things be bumped back, or similarly, the idea of, what was it? I know Chris brought up a lot the idea of, basically, if you want new equipment, has there been some level of cost-benefit analysis to show that this is the way to go?
Right.
I think we may want to be overt in communicating that we're looking for that as part of this process. Otherwise, because if they haven't been doing it, so they will keep on not doing it unless we really are clear otherwise.
Yeah, so one of the things that, I have put a little bit of thought into this, and I just want to, but I haven't come to a conclusion, I just wanted to kind of float this, is that I do think, at least in my own deliberations last year, there is a clear delineation in my mind from replacement of equipment that is nearing the end of its serviceable life and new equipment. And in my mind, I don't know, so new equipment in my mind, absolutely, there should be some sort of cost-benefit analysis or, financial plan associated with it, particularly when it comes to things like, are we already doing this service through private contracting, or if it's a new service, should we be doing it privately? Can another department help us? Like, those kinds of questions. For existing equipment, sometimes I wonder, like, I've never seen that thing before, or the highway department has, and I'm making up numbers, we'll talk about inventory in a little bit, but, the highway department has, 10 half-ton trucks. Are they actually using 10, or are they using 8? There's 2 standbys, or, so that level of analysis. And honestly, I don't know if we need to provide that level of scrutiny or not, particularly when it comes to replacement equipment. If the police chief tells us that he needs X number of cruisers, like, who am I to?
This is largely what I say, right.
Yeah.
I would push back on that slightly, and I'm gonna use fire and police as an example, because they contrast really well with something like, I would use schools as an alternative example, where you're looking at departments with very repetitive capital needs, to the point that it, to my understanding, looks to be highly formulaic. We know cars last X long, therefore we should be replacing on this schedule. And there was, I think there was a speaker last meeting who brought this up, or maybe but I'm kind of, golly, that puts a hard burden on the departments that don't have that ease of describing their needs, because it's real easy to go, oh, of course police need, like, as we're figuring this, of course we have to prioritize police, because the plan's really clear on it, versus these other needs that might be more novel each time, or might not have the same repetitive weight.
But that's the nature of it, right? That's the
It
nature.
came up in the discussion last week that the school committee had over the ARPA request, because we've had a couple of requests for trucks for the school department fall below the line over the last couple of years. And I don't think it made our request list. The superintendent submitted hers today, but it is exactly the case, right? Like, how many trucks do you really need? Can you get by with less? And how long can you nurse that, crumbling thing, right? And the answer is, it's all very subjective at the end of the day.
That's number
right?
one, and the fact that some departments may have a harder time because of the non-regular
Right.
capital items, that's just the nature of that's just the nature of the departments. I mean, the police department is the police department, and they need vehicles to do their job, and those vehicles are always on the road, and they're always running, so yeah, it's very simple for them to justify existing replacements. And the same thing, a little bit harder, this much, a skosh harder for the fire department, because their equipment, especially larger equipment, has bigger capital costs, but it lasts longer, it lasts for 15 years and 20 years, but when it comes due that you need another big truck, yes.
So what if we were to, just to try to tie this off, what if we were to, as a general request, say, for items that represent new inventory, that we want some sort of cost-benefit
Right.
analysis. For items that represent replacements of aging inventory, then it is encouraged, but, depending upon the situation, you may or may not include it. Is that?
Well, at the very least, and I think they already do include it, is we want to know the age of the vehicle you're replacing, how many miles was on it, and then we'll know. I mean, so here's this police car, it has 104,000 miles on it. We're not going to get any more reliably for a police, so that's,
I guess for me, the question is, are you really replacing, or are you added. This was,
Well, it always comes up.
this was always a
Right, that question always
Police
comes up.
department, they told us, this car is the end of its useful life, we've got to replace it. And then we bought the new one, and they were still running the
That
old one too.
doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
That has not happened in the last 3 years.
There's literally a new sheriff in town.
Yeah.
or a new chief in town.
Yeah.
Uh,
That has not happened in at least over 3 years.
Yeah.
Because we asked that direct question, and that's why we also want the inventory.
Yeah,
And so the other thing, just to begin to catch you up, Rob, is, we did last year, for the first time in the 4 or 5 years that I've been doing finance committee and capital planning, we did get an updated comprehensive inventory
Yep.
of all vehicles.
okay, good.
And my understanding, the intent is to update that annually, so
Okay.
I will also request that of the acting town manager to update that.
Okay.
That inventory.
Good.
And I'll share with you last year's, and I've got it in an email someplace.
So when they're submitting to us, do they just submit for this current year that they're asking for, or do they give us a 5-year
No,
plan?
there's actually 10 years
10 years.
in some of them, but
Yeah.
at least 5
But at least 5
in
years.
Okay.
Cleveland. So the document that I forwarded you this afternoon was basically a PDF form of all of the data that carried over from, that was in FY '25.
Yeah,
It's a sum total of all of the capital requests from all of the departments. The way it works is that if they are not funded in the current year, the department head has the wherewithal to reshuffle where they're projecting them in terms of where the need is, but there's a control number that remains constant. So we are actually able to track how long that item has been on a request list, how long, we've been looking, somebody's been looking for it, that sort of thing, because although we're not using that as a scoring mechanism, it is in all of our heads in terms of whether it's a new request or a lingering
Yeah.
request, an ongoing
Yeah.
request. And then, in a minute, we'll get into some of the other criteria. But, the benefit of ClearGov is that it does give us the ability to kind of track that from year to year.
okay, good.
So, and yeah, I feel very confident in our ability to actually track replacements and kind of cradle to grave at this point, at least from an inventory standpoint. One of the things that surfaced when I reviewed the proposed financial manual was care and maintenance of capital items. And I think that is something that if we, should probably talk about it as an agenda item for a future meeting. But as you gentlemen may recall, for the last couple of years, we have not really gotten any detail or direct answers when it comes to tracking of vehicle maintenance and that sort of thing. I have yet to determine where that requirement is actually grounded, in the manual. Is it the hard part of this exercise that we'll get to in a minute is this stuff derived from best practices prescribed by the state, charter, bylaw, or policy? And it's all referenced by section, but you can't actually get to the
What, the
individual.
policy
Yeah,
guide?
yeah,
It
yeah.
was an amalgam of all of them.
Right, but when you want to track to, okay, is this actually enforceable or not? Like, today.
Sure.
It's very difficult
Yep.
to get there. But I would certainly like to have that insight in terms of, what are we doing to ensure that we're maximizing the life cycle of, in particular, vehicles. Anyway. Okay, so that's good feedback and duly noted. The
most important thing that all the department heads need to know is that it's a sales pitch. You are selling it to us, who in turn have to sell it to town meeting. And so the poorer you sell it to us, the less likely it's going to be approved, so don't be surprised.
I could not agree more. I circulated available meetings in an email earlier today. Given the lack of clarity in terms of readiness for presentations, my inclination is not to harden a calendar right now.
I haven't even,
until-
I've seen the email,
Yeah,
but I haven't
okay.
really looked at mine.
So what I would ask you all to do is to look at that, bounce it against your own calendars, and just let me know directly where and if you have conflicts. And then I will feed back at our next meeting, whenever that is to occur, and I would like to schedule at least one. And we can solidify a schedule at that point, and hopefully I'll have better feedback in terms of readiness for the departments.
There was one Tuesday in here, Tuesday, December
Yeah,
2nd. I
how
didn't
did that-
understand the Tuesday, December 2nd one.
I have no idea.
I'm assuming Tuesday, maybe Tuesday's not December 2nd. Let's see.
I don't know. I'll have to go
December
back.
2nd is a Monday.
That's why.
Okay, so it's a Monday. All right. I thought that was an issue. Okay.
So, my only thought about scheduling is most committees operate on, they're the first and third Wednesday of the month, and that's easy for everybody to follow, the members, the public, and so that would be my preference.
So
The
as it
problem-
turns out, that is not feasible. So the.
Because of the way this committee is comprised.
Right, so the way this committee is
Fascinating.
comprised is we have a Monday night, a Tuesday night, a Wednesday night, and a Thursday night meeting represented amongst the members of this,
Oh,
of this,
wow.
of these committees, right? So in order, planning board, select board, school committee, finance committee.
Got it.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Also, the planning board meets on the second and fourth Monday of each month.
Yep,
And the school committee meets on the first and third Wednesday of each month.
right.
Some months, those are the same weeks because of the way the dates fall in the
Yeah.
calendar, right?
Yeah.
So this year, I believe it's October, where we're meeting on the same weeks in October. And so the availability for us all to have a Monday or a Wednesday is a Monday and a Wednesday of the same week, right? So it is,
It's a crazy, yeah.
it's nuts. It's, yeah, and, you know, truth be told, it's nuts. So the way we've done it, you know, over the last, I think, is this my second or third year on capital planning, is, this is the first time, you know, anybody's kind of gone down and kind of looked at the calendar and said, here's the list
That
of
far.
what we think are the available dates.
Yeah.
What we have typically done is at the beginning of each month, kind of said, okay, this is kind of where we're at,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
My thinking on this is, first of all, invariably, somebody cancels or is not available when they thought they'd be available, or is sick, or there's a snowstorm. And then secondly, our prioritization exercise for the current fiscal year usually takes 2 to 3 meetings to get through. It requires a little bit of homework. We all kind of go and put in our rankings, and then invariably one of us messes it up, and then we talk about it and change our minds, and,
Yeah.
you know, so, so we need a plan for that, right? It's like basically meetings for department head presentations. We will feedback and kind of share ideas as they come in. And then we're going to need 2 to 3 meetings to kind of land on
Yeah.
our prioritization for the current fiscal year.
Yep.
The additional background is that what this committee has not done in recent history is actually formalized a plan or a recommendation to the town manager for a 5-year capital plan outlook. And that is actually prescribed in the charter and in bylaw.
Yep.
And also in the proposed financial manual.
Yep.
And so originally, we had thought that we were going to take the FY '25 submissions and do them already by this point, and then we ran into this budget crisis this year, and none of us had the bandwidth to deliver on our intentions. So the thinking is to get that ball rolling, maybe do our annual work earlier, and then take some time in December, January, February to offer a more holistic feedback to the department heads, the town manager, finance committee, whomever wants to listen to us.
Here's the FY capital plan has to be submitted to the town manager by the end of the year.
Okay.
Yeah, the capital plan proposal is like the first thing in the charter derived schedule. So our work needs to be done early. So that's the intent,
And if we
right?
start early, if we start in end of August, first week in September, we should be able to do that pretty handily.
Yeah.
In other years, we've really run up against it, where we're meeting like the week before
We
Christmas.
met Christmas week
Right.
2 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's sort of the background. So my thinking is, typically we've done 5 to 6 weeks of presentations, I think.
Yep.
And then it's been, 2 to 3 meetings to kind of nail down the priorities list. So that brings you to, 8 or 9. My thinking is, and we will need to have a discussion over the course of the next several weeks on how do we approach a 5-year plan and, what level of guidance can we offer? And how do we get to that guidance? But I think that, we're probably at least looking at 3 or 4 more meetings to get there.
I would think so.
The good news is that we don't have any sort of charter deadline to do that.
Right.
So we can, typically the town manager presents his or her budget in February. So, there is a little bit of lag time in between those two while they're doing their FY '26 capital plan and financial forecast, fiscal forecast, that we could, put the finishing touches on the stuff in January or February.
How do we know that far in advance how much money we're gonna have?
We
to
don't-
fund the
we
capital
don't.
plan?
We don't determine, the capital planning committee does not determine the budget. We determine the priority of the requested items. And the town manager
I-
and town meeting decide what is the budget going to be and how far down the list we can go.
We don't recommend on that at all? We just
We-
prioritize?
Right.
We historically have not. I'll direct you to and share with you some documents, and Tom and I have kind of beaten this back and forth over the last couple of years. The charter specifically refers to to submit a capital plan. And the document that we have, the proposal, also refers to the word fiscal is actually in that section and referring to the plan. So historically, the work of the capital planning committee has just been to submit a prioritized list. The town manager then looks at available funds from free cash and other available sources, comes up with a number to support capital, and then draws a line in terms of where that number is based on his or her priorities and the available funds.
The town manager can reprioritize.
Can reprioritize,
right.
Although, this has been discussed pretty significantly, is that it would raise everybody's eyebrow if all of a sudden our second priority goes down to 23, that would cause a meeting of the capital planning. Like, that's not really foreseen. The town manager has the ability to change things, a couple of positions here and there, but really not wholesale, just, hey, I'm gonna put all your things in a hat and pick out the ones I want. That's not allowed.
I guess I'm remembering a time almost pre-town manager when the capital planning committee did numbers.
Yeah,
This is the town manager.
Yeah, probably pre-town
And,
manager.
and, yeah, there's some,
Pre-CAFO, actually.
there's some ambiguity in the language, and so I think that the thinking here, my thinking, anyway, is that I don't think we're ever gonna get to a point where we are prescribing funding for the capital plan. I don't think there's a mechanism to do that. But I think that there is something in between what we're currently doing and calling out where the delta is based on the fiscal forecast that the town manager does do, and what the priority should be based on forecasted available funds, and then, what level of priority should we be putting on potentially expanding those funds, and raising additional revenues or bringing funds from other sources. But, those are debates we can have.
And our power, because there's never been a year where we've been able to say, oh yeah, we cleared off all the requests. We met all of them. So our power
This
is
is
the
the year.
ability. Right, exactly. Oh yeah, this is the year. Our power is in the prioritization.
Yeah.
And we had this discussion, and Chris Menard, who's not here tonight, was, always like, well, there should be a way for us to drop it off. I'm like, well, there is no way, as long as the department keeps submitting it, but we can keep putting it at the bottom so that it becomes clear it's never gonna get submitted. So those are the
And-
ways
and
we can
that-
telegraph.
As we move into making an actual 5-year plan, and also I think with putting forward a more clear expectation of this is what we want you to address when you're presenting to us, I'm, maybe it's optimistic of me, but I think that will go a long way on some of those projects, because once you start, the number of times we've said, why is this here? And it's, oh, this sub-constituency wanted it, or, oh, well, it seemed like a good place to put it, and I think that would help with a lot of the, when you're requiring a justification, I think a lot of those, which are also the ones that tend to fall towards the bottom of the list, may slough themselves off.
So, where I would like to go before the end of the meeting is we'll schedule at least one more meeting, and then at that meeting, I will bring forth a proposal to solidify a presentation schedule.
Yep.
And I think that's gonna take 2 or 3 weeks to get to, given where we currently are. I do want to take a moment to kind of read through the top of the PDF that I shared a little bit earlier. And this came up at our last meeting. I committed to.
Clear go?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I only printed one copy, so I apologize. But what is in ClearGov, in addition to a title for each request and a control number and a department, is a list of criteria that then the department head goes in and scores based on largely what the Collins program has suggested as available points for each area. And this has been manipulated a little bit by Lunenburg because of the limitations of ClearGov in terms of available points and how this is done. I'm not so much hung up on the points as I am reporting out the the binary yes or no answers to a lot of these questions. But I think, we can work with the department heads and the interim town manager in terms of how this scoring occurs. But I want to read through these, and then I want to propose at least one other, possibly a second. So state, federal mandates, basically a yes or no, and this is on a scale of 1 to 10. Useful life of requested asset in years, and this, I believe, runs up to 10, although the numbers on here appear to be 5s, up to 5, so it's probably a 5. Age of asset to be replaced, so up to 10, and this obviously gives greater credence to items that are being replaced. Increases effectiveness or efficiency. Reduces potential liabilities, threats to operations, adds or expands customer service, anticipated change in operating costs, anticipated change in revenue, grant funding, economic growth or community contribution, cultural or recreational opportunities, community contribution, education, community contribution, all of the next ones are all community contribution related. Education, public safety, aesthetic or historic preservation, environmental sustainability, public health, preliminary planning requirement. The preliminary planning requirement really relates to if this is a plan or a study that will likely lead to another capital request. So these become
multi-phased project.
multi-phased projects. So let me take a breath. That's a lot. The one other that came up at our last meeting that I think is probably a good thing to consider adding and maybe scoring around, but at least reporting out, is whether or not it falls into potential support for a Green Communities grant. And that really prescribes two things.
Separate from grant funding?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and, you know, maybe it's there and it becomes a criteria that we put on the presentations in terms of, have you been to the Green Communities Committee? Do you know definitively if it's in the zone or out of the zone? That kind of thing?
So that's a different thing than environmental sustainability?
Well, yeah, because everything else, everything on that list is actually, the assessment of the submitting department head, right? As opposed to a definitive, is it or is it not in a green community
Got it.
So
funding.
you want, what you're proposing is a criteria by which we judge, not by which they submit.
Potentially both.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean.
It's good information, it doesn't matter
Yeah,
to me.
my
Very
thinking
good.
is, I mean, because obviously the scoring is such that, we can do whatever we want with the scoring, to include completely ignoring it, which we have on occasion in the
And-
past.
and
Which, by the
there's-
way, Mr. Chair, if I can,
Yeah.
just for Rob, for the new member. So the Collins score is useful in guidance. It's kind of like finance committee recommendations to town meeting. You don't have to follow it, but it's a recommendation, and the higher the score should be the higher priority. When we do our individual rankings, some people, if they have things that are close, will use that, like I'll use it as a reference if I'm ranking things close, but I don't know of any but member who goes and follows that, and says, okay, I'm just gonna rank them by the Collins score.
Well, yeah, because a lot of these numbers are the subjective judgment of the
Right.
department head
Yes.
anyway.
Right.
Exactly right.
Exactly.
Yep.
Now, there's no magic to the order in which these things
No,
appear here.
Not to my knowledge.
Because it's a slightly different order than the priorities in the financial document.
So this, in terms of when it was built, this is a long, you know, I think we've been using Collins for 4 or 5
Yeah.
years now.
Yes.
The document that we shared in terms of the financial manual
Yeah.
Yeah,
is less than a month old.
okay.
So-
But it's a conglomerate
But
of
it- yeah.
everything we used to do, so that priority listing was basically predates the Collins
Oh, is that
score.
right? So you know the history.
So
better than
that
I do on
list that you see in there was the list that was used before there was a Collins score, so there is overlap.
I see,
Yeah.
okay.
I didn't know the history on
Yeah.
that. By the way, I think I agree with that prioritization. It makes
Oh, yeah,
sense.
I don't have
Well,
any problem with
I
it.
just noticed, for
I think it's
example,
common
a few
sense.
things are different order in this. The state and federal mandate is first here, but it's second in the,
Yeah, these aren't listed as
I don't think that
priority.
there's a.
The heading is not
Okay.
priority.
Yeah, but there is a clear priority in the manual.
right.
That has been proposed, so. And again, my reading of the manual is that those are general guidelines and you
Right.
can move up or down based on the circumstances as they present themselves, so. So, one possibility is the green communities, you know, yes or no.
Yep.
In my mind, it's kind of a binary thing. And maybe it's in the calculus, or maybe it's just a presentation requirement. The other thing that I've been banging back and forth, and I think we could potentially put a numeric score to this, but in doing so, it might overly politicize some of these, is the support of a controlling citizen, or controlling or influencing citizen board. So, for example, the DPW brings forth a proposal for new playground equipment for Wallace Park. That is the department head in the DPW that has day-to-day control of that park. But it is actually under the auspices of the Parks Commission. So in the past, there's been some controversy where department heads bring forth capital plan requests that are not endorsed by the overseeing committee. And so, one of the thoughts is, do we require that in the event of parks, cemetery, COA, schools would do it anyway, sewer,
Well, they're all under the DPW.
Yep.
Almost all of them are DPW.
yeah,
anyway.
that there's an endorsement of the board that has domain influence there.
I don't know if we require it, but certainly as part of the presentation, they should tell us if they have that endorsement or not.
Yeah, I would think that would come out in conversation. I've always asked that. And sometimes when something comes from an elected body that's under the care and custody of another organization like DPW, they, haven't really pushed it as hard as that committee, commission, or whatever wants. So it really is incumbent upon, when the DPW is coming forward, we should make sure that all those elected bodies know about it so they can be there to answer questions.
Yep.
But I don't think it has to be part of the
Okay.
Collins score.
And as we're discussing this in my mind, I'm like, oh, that's going to maybe affect our timing as well, given we're in
Yeah.
summer and, we're
Yeah.
moving into September and
Yep.
that kind of thing, so we need to be thoughtful about that. Okay, that's good feedback. Based on the conversation we're having, I think those fall more into the category of compulsory stuff for the presentation or narrative and
Yep.
less in terms of the Collins
Yeah, I would
scoring.
agree. Yep.
Okay. All right, I'm good with that. That's good feedback. All right, I think I have what I need for those. Discussion on draft financial policy manual and possible follow-up. So this is really intended to be an introductory conversation. I don't have a direct deadline, to my knowledge, on this document. The background on this is that this was a request that was made by, I believe, the town manager to the Department of Local Services, and there was a specific funding source for this.
Yes.
And it is as it says, a financial policies manual that is, I think the benefit of it is that for somebody who wants to know how to do one of the many things that are outlined in the manual, in our case, our domain consideration, I think, is largely the capital planning section. You start from the charter, you go to the bylaws, then you go to the policies, and then you go to the general opinions of the members and the town manager and the select board and the finance committee. But it can get very convoluted in terms of how you're going to do things and how you prioritize things.
Right.
This, were we to adopt it, outright, and I'm not suggesting that we do, or that we recommend the select board do it. I do think, though, if we were to do it, it would make things a lot clearer than they currently are. Like, this document could be very good in terms
That's why it
of
was presented.
driving clarity.
That
Yeah.
was, that was the collation of all the other documents, instead of bouncing around, putting them together was with that intent. So that somebody could see all the fiscal and financial policies of the town, whether they come from the charter or bylaws or policies and procedures, that it all exist in one place. And of course, being a board member, I've seen it before the rest of this board has seen it, so. But for the purpose of this, I think you're right, we should be focusing, maybe not at this meeting, because it's just being introductory, it's just capital planning. I mean, I have no objection to them, I've read them already, but I would encourage everybody here to read them.
Yeah, so the capital planning section is relatively short. It goes from page 9 to 12, and 12 is about 80% of that page. So it's basically a 4-page document. And, I've already marked it up and have some questions and concerns. But for the most part, I could probably live with it as written, if I had to. I don't have any like major objections to any of it. Where I was a little bit hung up as I read through it, as I referred to a little bit earlier, is I'm thinking in my head, would this have to be adopted as a replacement to existing policy? Or in the case of where there's best practice, but is not explicitly stated in our charter, bylaw, or policies, would we then have to go and add that stuff to a policy, right, to make it enforceable? And I don't know the answer to any of that.
I don't think, and I am speaking as a single member, the board has not talked about this. It is my understanding that clearly the charter and clearly the bylaws have their own enforcement, and their own gravitas on their own, policies and procedures below that. This is just meant as a way to just put all that together and correlate all that together. But it is obviously subservient to all those other documents. So if you want to change something in here, you'd have to change it, either you have to change the charter, or you'd have to add a bylaw,
Right.
or you have to change a policy and procedure, and then it would make its way into this. Which means that without attention, annual attention to this quickly will become out of date, which is one of the things that I will bring up at a select board meeting, is that I think it's great to have it, but if we're not going to constantly update it on things that are changing, then it's gonna be useless very quickly.
Right. I agree. I think where I was hung up in this as I read it is that I consider myself to be fairly well informed in terms of our charter, bylaws, and policies. And as I read some of these things, it was, I don't recall ever reading that before, right? Which means it probably doesn't, either I missed it, which is a strong possibility, or it doesn't exist in any of those three documents. And if it doesn't, then it probably should be highlighted or redlined in terms of like, these are things that we need to actively add to a policy, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this thing is not indexed that way. It refers to references, but it doesn't
Right.
really footnote those.
Right,
those
that's what I was
things,
gonna
right?
say. If this was a legal document, every line would be footnoted with where it came from.
Right.
Somebody must have gone through that exercise when they wrote it, maybe not.
No, of course they did. I'm sure they did. And I'm actually it's actually a little eye-opening that they didn't do that, because obviously that's how they got to there.
Yeah, so what I'm getting at is, do those notes still exist? Can that be recreated?
They have to, now we're gonna get a lot of institutional knowledge loss in a day. So, I don't know. And I also don't know if it wasn't the intention of DLS to say, hey, we're gonna get you to this point. I don't know if that footnoting was an option that we could have told them about, or they intentionally knew that they weren't gonna do it, and like, hey, listen, we're gonna give you this, you can go have somebody go through and footnote it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I don't know what to make of it,
Yeah, I don't
other than it does leave open questions in my mind in terms of,
I didn't
what
read
do-
did it have an executive statement
Yeah.
at the beginning?
Yeah, but it doesn't,
I'll have to
and
read it
it
again.
refers to it basically being a conglomeration of, municipal best practice tailored to the conditions in Lunenburg and all
Right.
of these other derivative documents, right? But unfortunately, it doesn't delineate between what's the best practice and what's actually grounded in
Right.
some other enforceable thing.
So I think some of the reasons why it probably couldn't be footnoted maybe directly is because some of them, in order to make it readable, since they're pulling things from different places, they probably changed some of the English, so it couldn't be put in quotes. That is a direct footnote, so it's kind of paraphrased in some places. I believe that's probably what happened. I haven't gone through it with a fine-tooth comb to that degree.
Yeah, and nor have I, and I think at some point in my copious spare time, like I actually want to go through the references and
Right.
kind of
Well, what would
footnote
be
them myself.
nice if everybody, so we should do our 4 pages, and if everybody else did their pages, they should read it with a fine-tooth comb and say, hey, listen, please, somebody either show, we don't do this, or show me where that is, so that we can make sure, again, it's a living document, we want to make sure that it's changed and is accurate.
Yep. So anyway, that's kind of my ask, is if everybody could kind of read and mark up, and then we'll bring back to a future meeting and discuss it.
And I'll bring back, I mean, you may want to send back to the board, the chair at least, and the interim town manager.
This doesn't
saying,
exist in a Word format, does it?
Not to my knowledge.
What is it, only PDF?
Yeah.
We can ask. So, I don't
It'd be
know.
easier to mark up.
Yeah, of course, clearly, you can track changes, right? But anyway, the board should be told that at least we're in receipt of this, and this was the first glance at it. And so it will take us a time or two to review and final comments.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, but, generally speaking, big fan of the effort.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna take a little effort, a little bit more effort to land it, and also I think, we do need some, and I understand it landed at probably the worst time in terms of the transition of the town manager and that kind of thing. We do need some kind of guidance from the select board in terms of, what do you actually want, right, for
Well, I think
feedback.
they're just asking for it. I can probably say that pretty confidently. They're looking for accuracy our sphere of influence in that document. Like, this is what capital planning does. Is this accurate? Is this what you guys follow? Not that,
Yeah.
oh, we don't know this in the chart. Is this what you follow?
Okay, fair enough. All right, any other comments or anything on that? Okay. Any topics for future meetings outside of the scope of what we have discussed this evening?
Not for me.
No, I can't think of any.
All right, any public comment?
None for me.
I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So
So
moved. Well, do
moved.
we want to set the next meeting?
Oh, thank you for doing that.
Uh-huh.
So, yes, we're not going to adjourn yet. So, I think there's a strong possibility that, as we look at the available dates, we could have presentations as early as the 11th of September. So, in my mind, I would like to meet either on the Wednesday, the 21st of August, or the 28th of August, which is also a Wednesday. Another possibility is the town manager screening committee is now meeting on the 27th, which is a Tuesday, because the select board is not meeting. So we could potentially do another brief meeting following that, like we did tonight, and do a 2-for-1.
Either one is fine.
I know you're used to late Tuesdays anyway, so.
Yep. What are the dates we were discussing? Could you say?
Yeah, so it'd be either Wednesday, the 21st, Tuesday, the 27th, or Wednesday, the 28th.
Any of those work for me.
Yep.
They're all fine. I'm having surgery on the 15th, so the only thing is on the 21st, I expect to be perfectly functional, but I am informed that my pain levels may impair my thinking process a little bit.
I understand, yeah.
But I can also show up, grit my teeth, and do my dang job as well, so.
Okay.
No need to endure pain
Yeah.
if you don't need to, if there are other.
I largely think that this is gonna be another administrative meeting, like, we're not,
Yeah, we're not going to be meeting. it.
yeah, so.
But we do have to come up, if we're going to have them come up with some kind of framework template, at least loosely defined, we should have it by then, so they can start putting it together.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. So is the 21st okay with everybody?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go with that.
What time?
6:30 is really the earliest for me.
Me too.
Okay.
6:30?
Yep.
All right.
What, that's a Wednesday?
Yep,
Yeah.
Okay.
all right. Now I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Everybody moved it.
All in
Everybody
favor?
seconded it. There we go. Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Recording stopped.